To see this matchup between John Paul and Wolfe. It's top 4 now of VGC, and we're ready to kick things off here.
Excited to see which Pokemon the players bring. They've had a lot of time to think about this one, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is a quick team preview. Both of them likely being very familiar with what each other have on their teams, though Wolfe's still furiously writing it down.
I mean, the name of the game sometimes is still just making sure that you are confident in the information that you know that is available to you. And as we saw on that last matchup on stream too, there might be things that are still unknown, and that can play a huge factor in determining the matchup.
I think some of the fun too is, like, even if you know that stuff is there, you kind of get that mind game, right? Like, well,
yeah.
Is he really going to risk making this ridiculous play?
Exactly.
I think both of them have some cool tech moves where there is the threat of some weird stuff happening. So we're curious if we see them go aggressive in the first game, or if they spend some time playing a little more slowly, trying to feel each other out, and then perhaps turn it up a little bit in game 2 or 3.
There's definitely a couple of play styles that we might see here, but when we talked about how Wolfe has decided to train his Pokemon, being a little bit tankier, investing in that HP, and then also investing in those defensive and special defensive moves. It's gonna be a battle in this very first one. Does John Paul want to allow Wolfe to take it slowly, or does he want to set the pace of this match? And we're kicking things off with a double Tapu Koko on screen, and we also have Wolfe bringing his Rayquaza and an Incineroar on John Paul's side.
Kind of an interesting matchup. Contrary to the narrative going into this tournament, I would definitely, or this turn rather, I would definitely say it's Wolfe who has the more aggressive lead here, showing one of his restricted Pokemon immediately. Certainly the frailer, traditionally, of the two. I guess this Rayquaza maybe not so much, but he's going to have to be a little more careful here, where there's not a lot of danger on John Paul's side of the field. Incineroar threatening that fake out on either of these Pokemon. Does have to be careful of a potential Farium Z from this Tapu Koko, though.
Well, the very first thing that we're going to see is Wolfe powering up that Rayquaza with the Mega Stone. So it is going to be a Mega Evolved Pokemon in Delta Stream now, going to be making the field even weirder. Incineroar now with the fake out onto Tapu Koko means that Tapu Koko on Wolfe's side is not going to be able to do a thing this turn. Volt Switch from John Paul is going to reset the board here too, allowing him to get a little bit of a different position, but also giving Wolfe that information of what their Pokemon's going to be. And it's Rayquaza.
Both sides getting that Rayquaza out there, potentially an opportunity for Wolfe to get some damage in, although, with it intimidated and the switch, I'm going to guess he's not doing anything too crazy. And yeah, unfortunately whiffs an Earth Power, so trying to take down that Tapu Koko, not able to do so. Nice turn 1 for John Paul. Sort of interesting too on his side, he's choosing to whittle down that Tapu Koko, knowing that Rayquaza can't use Protect. Could have chosen to get some damage on Rayquaza instead, so perhaps seeing that Tapu Koko is either an easier knockout or a more threatening Pokemon for his team, trying to start getting that out of the way early.
Definitely a good read from John Paul there in order to protect the Tapu Koko. Now Wolfe decides, well, if you withdrew yours, I'm going to withdraw mine too. So going to put Incineroar in its place, and now we have a mirror matchup on the field for the moment. Intimidate going to do a lot to be able to keep John Paul's Pokemon in check here.
Yeah, the Intimidate's a big deal. Finally getting to match that up. Of course, there won't be any fake-out threat from Wolfe's side until next turn, so John Paul's got an advantage here, which he'll probably start losing in the next turn as Wolfe starts gaining momentum again.
Well, it is going to be a Mega Rayquaza on the field now, too, and Extreme Speed will move first. Incineroar now going to take a little bit of chip damage there, but it's Wolfe's turn to fire back with an Earth Power into the Incineroar slot on John Paul's side. It won't be enough to get the knockout, but you do have half health here on this Incineroar. Now it has to go back to John Paul.
Yeah, now this U-turn likely going to bring Tapu Koko out, but either way, provides the option. You can switch Incineroar again later, get another Intimidate out there. Nice damage with that Earth Power, and we see kind of why that Tapu Koko is being whittled down. Rayquaza probably trying to get that pick off with Extreme Speed, but Wolfe, wise to his tricks, largely mitigates the power of the Extreme Speed, and we end up with a pretty even board state again.
Even, but this is what we were talking about. Both players taking it really slow to try to feel each other out, what the strategy is going to be, what the end game is, and what the most important pieces are for both of these team compositions. We still don't know what those 4 Pokemon are. Maybe we'll get it here, and it's actually going to be Celesteela here coming in for Wolfe. That's going to be the 4th Pokemon that Wolfe has brought to this game 1. Protect as well. Rayquaza's going to protect, so very passive turn here coming in for John Paul. And it's going to have to be kind of passive on both sides here, as Wolf's not going to be able to get any damage.
Yeah, but kind of a winning turn for Wolfe there. He had Incineroar out. He was capable of using that fake out rather than just faking out into the protects. Realizes John Paul doesn't have much of a reason to allow him to do that. Gets a free switch instead. He does reveal his final Pokemon, so John Paul knows that Celesteela is a factor now, but I think he probably expected that. Like we were talking about the pregame, that's a really tough team to play Kyogre against, so not too surprised that we're not going to see it in Game 1.
So maybe we won't even see the Xerneas then coming in from John Paul, that fourth Pokemon, especially if John Paul was expecting that Celesteela to be the fourth Pokemon in Wolf's team for this Game 1. Maybe he's bringing something else.
I think both options are definitely viable here. It's another team where it's kind of the same way the other way, where setting up Xerneas against this team's tough, but we're not going to find out yet. With Incineroar just coming in, safely getting another Intimidate in the field, we'll have the threat of Fake Out next turn. Both players kind of just trying to whittle each other down until they can get into a situation when they can really start picking up KOs.
Especially because it's important here to be able to mitigate some of this damage that's coming in. Volt Switch onto the Rayquaza, still doing some chip damage. Now John Paul has set himself up to get a really nice board position, not only bringing Incineroar in, but now can kind of reset his position as well with that Volt Switch from Tapu Koko. And it's going to be Rayquaza coming back in.
Yeah, so just, you see the same Pokemon just cycling in, cycling out, trying to get the advantage. Another missed Earth Power here where John Paul's done a good job of dodging Wolf's attacks, but this Heavy Slam, I guess it's not going to do anything either. I was kind of expecting that to go in the other slot, but Incineroar gets weakened, but importantly, doesn't activate any potential berries.
Yeah, it doesn't. And that's something that's been kind of interesting here. You know, what does that Incineroar carry?
Yeah, I mean, it's crucial, too, where, you can avoid activating a berry, assuming it's there. It makes a huge difference. So even though that Heavy Slam kind of looks like it wasn't that effective, it makes it much easier with, like, pretty much any non-resisted attack to finish it off. Sometimes plays like this matter later, so let's keep an eye on Incineroar's help, see if Wolf can capitalize on this later in the game.
We got to keep an eye as well on those stat drops that we're seeing from both sides, because these Incineroars are putting in a lot of pressure here. But it is going to be Rayquaza's move to attack on John Paul's side, focusing down the Incineroar on Wolf's, and just barely going to miss the knockout.
Ton of damage, though, and we don't see a berry activate on this side. So the Life Orb damage, the only thing Wolf's going to get out of that exchange, though. He's going to lose the Pokemon as well. His Incineroar getting picked off by the U-turn.
Well, that's going to at least put John Paul up in the numbers game here. The U-turn as well, helping to reset the board state. But remember, we saw earlier on stream, Wolf's Incineroar carries safety goggles.
Yeah, so not going to help him here. One thing to keep in mind, too, I mean, that first knockout is huge because it's on Incineroar. It's going to be much harder for Wolf to pivot now. Really important for him to try to equalize the Pokemon count. And yeah, that Heavy Slam isn't going to be what does it.
It is not going to be what does it. The Heavy Slam doesn't really do it either there for Wolf. And so now Wolf has to kind of decide, do I want to bring in another Pokemon here, maybe another damage dealer, just to try to get something to happen?
Yeah, this Tapu Koko is kind of becoming a problem for Wolf, where none of his Pokemon deal super well with it. And it also makes it difficult for him to bring his own Tapu Koko into battle. And maybe he doesn't want to reset that electric terrain. I think he kind of has to here, but boosting the damage of electric type attacks, not great when two of the remaining Pokemon are flying type Pokemon. This Tapu Koko is likely to start throwing Thunderbolts or Volt Switches rather at.
Well, going into this next turn, it's going to be really crucial to see if John Paul can get a knockout. I mean, if you have the only Tapu Koko on the field, then you have a pretty good advantage. So
he's got a pretty serious edge here. I think, when Tapu Koko's weakened on Wolf's side, I think he's going to keep control of this board state. If he can keep his own Tapu Koko alive, which is easy enough, just Volt switching around, later in the game it could be crucial. He's going to want to avoid getting caught by a Fairy MZ, which perhaps he's making a switch to avoid that here.
Yeah, and Incineroar now going to come in for John Paul's Tapu Koko, saving it a little bit, keeping it safe here, but more importantly, going to get another Intimidate off where it really matters on the Celesteela. But Celesteela going to go back, so I guess it doesn't matter too much.
And that's the game, right? Just got to try to keep the Pokemon on the board that could still deal damage. We do see that Z move, so likely a nice play by John Paul, depending on what Pokemon it targets. Either of these could be good targets, likely going to pick up a knockout in either slot.
Yeah, definitely can get the knockout here, but it will be that Twinkle Tackle, and we're about to see who this Tapu Koko is going to be creating this dance with. It will be the Rayquaza. So Rayquaza getting targeted down by these beautiful stars. And there it goes.
Yeah, that's a big knockout for Wolfe. Not only does he equalize the score, but certainly Incineroar coming down there, because I think that's the Pokemon John Paul was willing to lose right now. Rayquaza going down makes things a little bit easier for Wolfe. No longer have to worry about those powerful Dragon Ascents. Makes it a little bit easier to protect his own Rayquaza, though. Tapu Koko coming back in, certainly going to know Dazzling Gleam at least, so it can do a lot of damage to either of these Pokemon, but Wolfe's Rayquaza is so powerful on the special defensive side that even a couple of those might not knock it out from here.
Yeah, John Paul's going to struggle a little bit dealing with some of Wolfe's bulkier Pokemon. You can even see now Rayquaza hasn't actually taken too much damage this entire game so far. So now it's coming down to the wire a little bit for Wolfe. Gonna be a little bit passive, trying to protect his own Tapu Koko. Incineroar actually reads that really well, goes for the Rayquaza, so that stops Wolfe from doing too much this turn.
Yeah, it's Dazzling Gleam going to help wear down Rayquaza. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be really close now whether or not another Dazzling Gleam can pick up this knockout. Nice turn for John Paul. Wolfe doesn't really gain anything from that protect. But you can tell, I mean, Wolfe's like on his back foot now. He doesn't really want to lose any Pokemon, trying to avoid taking too much damage, and trying to avoid an endgame where Tapu Koko makes it through and he has to take it on with Celesteela.
I was expecting some switches here, but actually we're going to see a Z move now from John Paul.
Yeah, this is pretty free where he knows that none of Wolfe's Pokemon can protect, so probably whatever this hit's going to be a knockout. Keep pushing that advantage. And John Paul still hasn't revealed his last Pokemon, so that's a big edge at Wolfe. Wolfe doesn't know exactly what he needs to preserve.
Well, we've seen Tapu Koko's covering a different slate of Z moves here, but it's going to be Gigavolt Havoc into the Rayquaza.
It survives.
It survives. Wow. That's actually really big for Wolfe, especially if Incineroar does not get a chance to double into it, and it doesn't.
So Incineroar going down, and Rayquaza could be picking up this knockout on Tapu Koko. That incredibly specially defensive Rayquaza turning around this game.
Oh my goodness, that's going to be a double knockout for Wolfe. And now John Paul is down to the last two Pokemon. Obviously, Rayquaza is still in a little bit of a pinch.
Yeah, but it's Kartana.
Red, but Kartana.
Ooh. Wolfe could have turned this one around. It looked like he was going to get knocked out of that turn. Rayquaza, because it survives, gets that big advantage, and there's no way a Kartana is going to be able to come back from a 3-1 deficit. You can only target one Pokemon at a time. Lots of Pokemon on Wolfe's side capable of dealing damage to this Kartana, and we see the forfeit here. Wolfe and that Rayquaza is so clutch, taking the first game of this semifinal set.
I am so appreciative of how much patience Wolfe executed within that last game, because there were several moments where you really could have made a read to get aggressive, and Wolfe was able to kind of sustain himself from doing so, and it paid off. So now this game one going in Wolfe's favor. What do you think John Paul needs to do in order to adjust for this next game?
But 5% more damage. I mean, jokes aside, I can't believe that Rayquaza survived that attack. I mean, obviously it's very specially defensive, but I think, like me, he expected to pick that one up. His Tapu Koko is dishing out a Z move that's about as powerful as Tapu Koko is capable of dishing out.
Yeah.
And between the Rayquaza's ability and the Assault Vest, just able to hang on there. But that game came within inches. One thing I thought was kind of interesting about he doesn't use that Kartana the entire game. By the time he finally sends it out, it's kind of useless.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if it might be worth working in a 4 Pokemon strategy here rather than just trying to grind down to 3. Wolfe, kind of known for being an expert at playing those slow games, and maybe he played a little bit into Wolfe's hands, even though it seemed like he had him beat.
Yeah, it's almost as if John Paul gave him too many turns to figure out what the end game was and the win condition. So going into match 2, it seems like John Paul knows exactly what kind of adjustments needs to be made. That was a really fast team preview, and already kicking things off in a very interesting way here. Wolfe wants to put a lot of faith into that Rayquaza, allowing it to hit the field first. And you've got double Incineroars on both sides, so lots of fake out pressure, and of course, that Tapu Koko for John Paul.
Kind of really seeing the difference in the two sides, Rayquaza, and the way that they can deploy it. John Paul not likely to want to send out his much more frail Rayquaza on turn 1, but Wolfe, he can play kind of loose with it, right? I mean, we've seen how sturdy this Pokemon is, so kind of why not? The only adjustment we see on turn 1 is actually on Wolfe's side, opting to bring fake out for the first turn instead of his own Tapu Koko.
Yeah, and I kind of like that. I think that's going to allow that Rayquaza to get set up really, really well. And even if Wolfe decides to switch it out, fearing a little bit about the Tapu Koko that's on John Paul's side, this is mind games. We are starting off really well here.
Yeah, the one positive thing for John Paul, it's Intimidate, not too effective on the Tapu Koko, so Incineroar getting a little more value for John Paul than for Wolfe, but both sides not threatening a fake out, so we're kind of on even ground compared to game 1, where John Paul got to start off as the aggressor. both sides taking their time picking moves here. I mean, we've hit the crunch time in this tournament. You know, Buiza wants to make a mistake. It's so easy in these GS Cup matches to make one mistake and just kind of let a game get away from you. Both sides are going to be careful not to let that happen here.
Wolfe already Mega Evolving Rayquaza, just needs to get those extra stat boosts from beefing up that Pokemon. That fake out going into the Incineroar slot means that Rayquaza might be a little bit free to do some damage here. Tapu Koko, though, just going to get some chip, go back to John Paul, and we'll see what ends up making its way into that slot.
I can't believe how little damage that Volt Switch does.
It does nothing.
Yeah, I mean, wearing down this Rayquaza with special attacks, it's going to take a while. So perhaps no surprise we see the Rayquaza on John Paul's side of the field. It'd be so much easier to get that knockout if he could land a Dragon Ascent on Wolfe's Rayquaza. We see the Icy Wind.
Wow, Icy Wind's going to slow down a lot of what John Paul wants to do here, especially because Rayquaza.
Oh, it's so much damage.
So much. Wow.
Yeah, again, really showing the difference between the two Rayquaza. You know, a Volt Switch onto Wolfe's takes barely any damage, and Icy Wind the other direction is just absolutely devastating. Airlock kind of trolling here, turning off the weather effect that Rayquaza would probably very much like to be taking advantage of right now, and it's kind of in trouble. You know, it can still threaten an extreme speed here, but Wolfe's Rayquaza, I would assume, is normally the slower of the two with this defensive build. Not after an Icy Wind, though, and John Paul's got to switch it right back out.
I think John Paul probably feels at that point that switching in Rayquaza into that Icy Wind was probably a bit of a mistake, but Xerneas now a little bit of an adjustment for John Paul's strategy, not going to bring that Kartana, but this Dragon Ascent here from Wolfe's Pokemon is going to find its way into that Xerneas as well. Of course, a little bit resistive there, so you're not going to see too much, but Incineroar using U-turn, a little bit more chip damage on the field. Does a little bit more to that Incineroar than you saw the U-turn do to that Rayquaza.
Yeah, that damage in Xerneas is big, though. I mean, with all that damage on Rayquaza, if Wolfe can wear down the Xerneas, prevent it from becoming a real threat with Geomancy, he's probably going to move on to the finals. And Tapu Koko coming in here is a great Pokemon. Quicker than Xerneas, so it's going to be really difficult for John Paul to get a Geomancy off in front of these two Pokemon. You know, even a Protect now, you don't necessarily want to take the damage from a protected Z move, potentially putting it in range from a knockout from Dragon Ascent now. Both sides getting Incineroar off the field, allowing them to bring it back in, either threaten a fake out or intimidate later. But Wolfe's getting really close in this one.
Really close, but John Paul's not out of it yet. So I'm excited to see if this Xerneas is going to be able to get that Geomancy off in order to start dishing out some real damage here. I think that could really change the game if John Paul is able to make that feat happen.
Yeah, we've seen him turn around quite a few games so far, and I think Xerneas is probably going to be the key. That Rayquaza is just so weak now and so naturally, challenged on the defensive side. It's going to have a hard time pulling back the game by itself. So John Paul's really going to have to be smart here, maybe try to make a few reads, see if he could trick Wolfe into whiffing a few attacks. He's 2 or 3 turns behind now, but Xerneas is probably going to have to be the way back. Maybe get some chip damage with Tapu Koko here to try to set up a sweep later.
Looks like John Paul might be opting to save Xerneas for a really safe switch-in. So Incineroar are going to come in and try to mitigate some of the damage on Wolfe's side with that Intimidate. Playing very passively here with that Protect as well. Let's see if Wolfe is able to read this.
Yeah, such a scary spot for John Paul. You know, his Tapu Koko has to be wary of Twinkle Tackle. He's got to be wary of Earth Power. We'll see which of the two Pokemon the Z move goes into. Really can't afford to lose Incineroar right here, so I got to hope he blocked this one with the Protect.
We're about to find out. It is going to be the Incineroar, though.
So that's a lot of key damage on a key Pokemon.
Oh, it's not going to be enough for the knockout, but Earth Power goes into the Tapu Koko, so John Paul's Incineroar will live to see another day. Yeah,
but again, you know, Wolfe playing this so well, Incineroar just above the amount of health it needs to consume that berry. 71 HP is not enough. You know, a lot of different attacks that Wolfe's team can pick off Incineroar from here. It's going to be really tough to keep that Intimidate cycling.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you get out of this one as John Paul. If you let Incineroar go down here, Rayquaza is going to need some support on John Paul's side. It will go down quickly, too. The options are starting to look limited on John Paul's side of the field.
Well, Rayquaza's going to get switched out here for Wolfe just to try to reset those attack stats there, since it did get intimidated a turn before. We're seeing a Protect as well, so now matching John Paul's passive turn moments before. Incineroar are going to take the fake out for that Rayquaza, and we're also going to see, oh wow, a Dazzling Gleam. Not going to do too much to that Incineroar either.
Yeah, I mean, not great, but at least it's some damage there.
Yes.
You know, you got to do this one turn at a time. I know one of our fellow commentators like to see something about pennies and pounds. I don't know if that's a quick enough transition to start taking back this game, but at least he won the turn. Unfortunately, lost the fake-up pressure. Wolfe doesn't even care about his. Just trying to sneak Rayquaza back in here, perhaps get a couple more key attacks off.
Yeah, Delta Stream coming back onto the field too. So that's going to help keep Rayquaza nice and healthy here. But the Thunderbolt onto Incineroar will be enough for the knockout. And now John Paul has 3 left.
That's rough. I mean, this is going to be an impactful Dazzling Gleam. At least he gets some super effective damage. Rayquaza definitely at least felt that one, unlike the Volt Switch. But again, you're kind of just seeing him whittle away at Wolfe's very defensively oriented Pokemon. And we've already seen how weakened that Rayquaza is. I don't know if this is a combination of 2 Pokemon I would try to set up Geomancy in front of. We're kind of running the situation where John Paul might not have much choice. You know, either go for the Geomancy, go on the offense, but Xerneas is going to have to do something to try to bring this game back.
I want to see the Geomancy. I think at this point, like, that's going to help a lot in order to actually get that damage and maybe knock out that Rayquaza. But this next turn is going to be really crucial to see if John Paul can turn this around.
And unlike the last game, this time it's Wolfe who hasn't had to show his last Pokemon. You know, assuming that final Pokemon is Celesteela, that is a big problem for John Paul. He can't afford to lose Tapu Koko, so really all 3 of his Pokemon now kind of feel too valuable to lose.
It is.
And that's a tough spot to be in when you're already behind.
Yeah, it is going to be Celesteela as Wolfe's 4th and final Pokemon in this game. Another Dazzling Gleam. John Paul's really trying to put the gas in the pedal right now. Not enough to knock out the Koko, but now Wolfe's Tapu Koko gets a chance to fight back. Does a little bit more, and finally, we get to see that Geomancy.
So Xerneas does get to boost its stats, and man, it's got a lot of ground to make up for here. It's not impossible, but Moonblast is certainly not going to be knocking out this Celesteela. And there's some other issues to the field, too. The one thing on Jean Paul's side of the field you really like is at least you have Tapu Koko out with Celesteela, but no electric terrain. There's at least the threat of Wolfe trying to bring in Rayquaza if he's expecting a Moonblast instead of a Dazzling Gleam in order to get that protection for Celesteela against electric-type attacks. And only 76 HP in Tapu Koko. That Pokemon can't go down yet. If Wolfe is going, or if John Paul's going to win this game against Wolfe, he really needs to find a way to use Tapu Koko to help knock out the Celesteela. That green bar is very full.
Is very full, but both Pokemon on John Paul's side are still very vulnerable. Wolfe going to protect that Celesteela to make sure that it has some sort of win condition against the Xerneas. Moonblast, though, good read from John Paul into the Koko slot. So Wolfe's Koko is going to be out of this one.
Oh, we see the Z
Wow.
move. So great protect by Wolfe there. That would have been absolutely disastrous if he hadn't blocked this. Still going to do some pretty good damage, but at least avoiding disaster.
Definitely going to avoid disaster, but this Z move is still going to hit its mark through the protect onto that Rayquaza. How much damage is it exactly going to the Celesteela? Not going to do enough there. That protect is going to help a lot, but that's still a significant chunk.
Yeah, Celesteela going to nibble on some leftovers, get a little bit more of that health back, but you know, every bit of health on Celesteela matters for both of them. You know, the leftovers perhaps will be just enough to survive an attack later, and either way, you know, perhaps the damage from that protected Z move will be enough to at least make Wolfe think twice here. I'd be surprised if we don't see Incineroar coming in, get some fake out pressure, try to make some cute plays. If nothing else, it gives Wolfe the option of getting a little more leftovers health. I can't imagine Jean Paul giving Wolfe any freebies here, but maybe he feels like he has to. You know, it's getting to that point in the game now where things are very close, and at this point, even if you were to trade Pokemon, you got to assume the Rayquaza on Wolfe's side of the field, and I guess both sides of the field, no extreme speed. So even a low health Pokemon surviving may not be good enough.
We're also at the point now, too, where Xerneas Geomancied, it has its toolkit ready to go. So it will be able to pump out significant amounts of damage into Wolfe's team, and that's really where we are going to see John Paul start turning things around.
Yeah, I mean, he's so close to a winning board state, right? I mean, this is what it would look like. He's got Tapu Koko out to check that Celesteela, who's Wolfe's intended. Xerneas counter. Xerneas has those boosts. He just needs to get like 1 or 2 cheap attacks off here without Wolfe trading back in order to win the damage trade.
Well, it's going to be a double protect from John Paul, so just trying to eliminate that fake out there from Wolfe's side of the board.
Wolfe, okay, just the U-turn. I was curious if Wolfe would try anything spicier there, but yeah, I mean, just realizing there's no point in a fake out, but you know, that little health from Celesteela just ticking up could make a difference. That turn wound up being pretty dead there, but it's still kind of same board state, you know. John Paul got to find a way to get rid of Celesteela. Wolfe going to make sure he can deal with Xerneas before Celesteela is knocked out. Tapu Koko going down probably clears a board for Celesteela to win. Which of these Pokemon will go down first?
Tough call. I mean, there's been a lot of very slow gameplay within this game as well. I mean, game 1 into game 2, I was expecting something to move a little bit faster, but...
Yeah. Wolfe has an edge now, though. I think one thing to keep in mind here, so both the Pokemon on John Paul's side of the field use Protect. Wolfe's didn't, and Celesteela is definitely the most important Pokemon here. He risks not protecting on this turn. Let's see if the gamble pays off.
Oh! Incineroar is going to hang on just by a thread here, but the Volt Switch from Tapu Koko is going to be enough to get the knockout. So at least we have Incineroar now that is going to be down for Wolfe, and this is going to be a little bit better for John Paul.
That's a big knockout, although perhaps Incineroar faints a hero. If it had been knocked up with a Dazzling Gleam, the Volt Switch would have moved over to Celesteela, done some damage. But this is a heavy slam. We're probably going to see Xerneas go down here and bring us down to a 2-2 game.
Heavy slam is going to connect with that Xerneas, and there is not enough health in that health pool to be able to keep it alive to do any more damage with that Geomancy. And what's most important is that Celesteela does get that Beast Boost.
Yeah, that's a big deal, and Celesteela is a really crucial Pokemon here. But we've ended up with a really fun endgame, I think. Tapu Koko is going to come back out. It's going to reset that electric terrain. Likely going to be able to take down Celesteela with a single electric attack, should it connect. On the other side of the field, Wolfe has the, I believe, slightly healthier Rayquaza. At the very least, if it has less health, I guess, the Assault Vest will make it feel healthier than it really is. And extreme speed being threatened in both directions. Celesteela not really going to care, but certainly both Rayquaza and Tapu Koko kind of have to be wary if their health gets too low.
We got to be wary too. Remember, we've seen that Wolfe's Rayquaza has been heavily trained in being defensive, like with, you know, having a little bit of a higher health pool, maybe a little bit more in like the special defense and just regular defense. So who is actually going to move faster?
Yeah, I think he's also going to be wary of Icy Wind. You know, I think if Wolfe could just get a cheeky Icy Wind here, it'd probably knock out the opposing Rayquaza, maybe even get Tapu Koko slow enough where then Celesteela could just outpace it and knock it out. There's so many things that can kind of go wrong. Wolfe's Rayquaza just has like so many strange options. It's like, well, how do I deal with this? Or Rayquaza is being threatened by a knockout. Earth Power would certainly knock out Tapu Koko. So there's a lot of selections that John Paul can make here that go wrong. Opts to protect his Tapu Koko. Let's see if Wolfe can take advantage of it. Or I'm sorry, his Rayquaza.
Well, wide guard coming in from Celesteela as well, just to provide some widespread protection for Wolfe's Pokemon. Rayquaza is going to go for an extreme speed into the Rayquaza slot on John Paul's side, but Thunder, it is going to connect, and it's going to be the Celesteela here, knocking it out.
Ooh, so that's definitely not what Wolfe is hoping for right there. It's going to make this tough. Now, a Dazzling Gleam would be single target, so it would do even more damage than we've seen before. Probably just enough to pick up this Rayquaza. And that's the first time I believe we've seen Thunder. All those Z moves from this Tapu Koko have been a little bit more powerful than normal, working off of Thunder instead of Thunderbolt. And that's such a huge knockout. You know, John Paul seemed like he was so far behind here, but now his Mega Rayquaza is going to get to Mega Evolve. Either of his Pokemon dishing out an attack here could mean that we're going to Game 3.
Well, that's exciting. I mean, it looked like John Paul was kind of on the back foot a little bit. And of course, this game isn't over yet, but the extreme speed is going to be enough. Wolfe's Rayquaza going to go down here.
And man, it was just that close.
Wow.
I'm excited to see the Game 3 here.
Oh
really well-played game by both of these players, and it just kind of came down to a read at the very end there. Got a 2v2. There were a lot of options both players had, and John Paul's the one who picked the right moves. Was able to get off a knockout relatively for 3 there, and also hit that Thunder. You know, don't forget about that. There wasn't any rain on the field, so the odds of hitting that Thunder were better than not, but not fantastic. Really crucial knockout, and boy, the tension is up here. Our last game on the main stage for the Video Game Championship tonight, seeing which of these two players will move on to the Video Game Championships Masters Finals tomorrow. Couldn't be more excited to see what these two players choose to bring for this last game.
Well, what's been really exciting for me, too, watching the top 8 so far, is that we've had a significant number of Game 3 matches for the top 8, whereas for most of the Ultra format, we have had quite a few 2-0s during this weekend.
They're really just seeing how closely matched these players are, where now we're seeing the matches slow down a little bit as each side kind of just plays conservatively to make sure they're not giving up too big of an advantages. But, you know, any of these games could easily go either way. One of these players are going to have to do the right moves to make sure that this game goes their way and make sure they advance to tomorrow's finals. Both these players will be worthy North American International Champions, and one of them will get the chance tomorrow, and one of them, unfortunately, will be playing their last game right here.
What a way to end the day for the Video Game Championships. But we now have that game 3, John Paul, Wolfe, completely tied up as we get a chance to look at the board state here. And John Paul going for a little bit more of a bread and butter approach. Xerneas going to be the lead for John Paul. Wolfe now continuing that run with that Rayquaza.
Yeah, we've seen John Paul make some adjustments. Xerneas, we didn't see it all in the first game. Last game was in the back. Now he's just going straight up with it. It was a pretty integral part of him doing enough damage to win that previous game. On Wolfe's side, we go back to the lead that he used when he won game 1. Maybe not as excited about this matchup as what he saw before. Still threatening a lot of damage onto Xerneas with either of these Pokemon, but Rayquaza doesn't really want to trade with his Xerneas. Not only is he has a type disadvantage, but also has the issues of just speed, where it's not necessarily going to stop the Geomancy, so has to bring that Celesteela in, start checking the Xerneas right away.
Definitely is going to check the Xerneas a little bit here. Rayquaza now, again, Mega Evolving, going to be able to pump out some pressure here. And most importantly, too, it does continue to change the field a little bit. Delta Stream will add a bit more of protection for this one. And Tenora going for the fake out into the Celesteela slot. So good read there by Wolfe. And now that Dragon Ascent has full reign to be able to make its mark onto John Paul's side of the field.
Yeah, it's likely going to Xerneas slot. Wolfe just taking what damage he can. Not going to do incredible damage here, but it could make a difference, like we saw in the last game. He's going to slowly start wearing that Pokemon down. Geomancy, though, powering up, and Wolfe's going to have to try to deal with this one. He has all of his Pokemon to help this time, but so does John Paul.
Yeah, and of course that Incineroar has been doing a lot of work as a support Pokemon for Xerneas just this entire weekend. So I think that it's going to continue to prove itself here in this matchup as we do see that Geomancy continue, and now it's ready. That Xerneas is ready to go.
Yeah, John Paul's probably going to want to try to get that Incineroar in and out. Kind of an awkward spot where you both would like to attack the Celesteela to get that big damage in, but also since Wolfe switched Celesteela in and hasn't been intimidated, so its damage output's pretty threatening. You're probably going to need more than one Intimidate for Xerneas to get out of Heavy Slam KO range here anyway, so knocking out Celesteela is really the answer. And you see Wolfe withdrawing with Rayquaza, got what he could on that turn when he knew the fake out wasn't coming, but it's not the answer. Incineroar here to help.
Will help a little bit here. I mean, it is going to get an Intimidate off onto at least John Paul's Incineroar. That's going to help in that department, but not necessarily on the Xerneas. Incineroar, though, switching out just so we can get that Intimidate reset here. Tapu Koko coming back to the field and doesn't do a whole lot to actually, pressure Wolfe's side of the board for the moment. Maybe getting another Thunder at some point, but Moonblast into the Incineroar slot does not knock it out.
And no Protect from the Celesteela. Is it going on the offense?
It is going on the offense. Heavy Slam now. Will connect with the Xerneas. Is it going to be enough for the knockout? Yes, it is.
Now, Wolfe makes it look easy this time. It seemed like he was grinding against that Xerneas all game. Just couldn't quite do enough damage to knock it out. This time, Xerneas on the field for a grand total of 2 turns. Gets picked off pretty easily, and Wolfe's got to be feeling relieved after that.
This is a dangerous position for John Paul because not only did Wolfe get that final blow, but now it has that Beast Boost, and there isn't a whole lot at the moment that can really deal with that hefty Pokemon.
That's a really interesting board state, though, where, John Paul obviously doesn't want to just give up Xerneas, but he's got 2 Pokemon out that are pretty good against Celesteela. Fantastic, you might say. The Incineroar has been weakened greatly on Wolfe's side, and you got to assume the last Pokemon for John Paul is Rayquaza. If he can knock off that Incineroar, not have to worry about the Intimidate anymore, there's certainly a world where John Paul can turn this one around. I think this game is really tight. There's elements of how this played out that might actually advantage either trainer.
Going to have to be a little bit of a rotating door for John Paul to continue to get those Intimidate resets, and Wolfe is going to have to play around that, and I think we're going to see a couple of switches here. So yep, we are going to see an Incineroar switch out from Wolfe's side to also get that Intimidate reset, and Rayquaza coming in, ready to help out its partner Celesteela, dish out that damage.
Yeah, that Delta Stream ability, also a big deal, going to help reduce the super effective damage Celesteela takes if it does, but not like that.
No, that was a tickle again. A lot of John Paul's Pokemon's moves, he was expecting a guy to do a little bit more than that, have not been super effective.
Yeah, still, at least getting to whittle the Rayquaza down. Celesteela just seems like it's getting away with what every turn, where nothing really seems to be troubling it too much. One thing to keep in mind as this game progresses, too, we still have to wait to see those Z moves. That's going to take a big chunk out of some Pokemon on both sides. So, if either of them could prevent a Z move completely, that'd be a big deal. But this is going to be a big Heavy Slam.
Big Heavy Slam right into the Tapu Koko slot. Will hang on potentially to be able to use that Z move now. So
yeah,
that's exciting. This is exciting stuff, Scott.
Oh, it's such an awkward spot. So this Tapu Koko has been weakened enough now where an Extreme Speed would finish it off. But it's dangerous to actually try to do that. You know, if you're to use Extreme Stone Tapu Koko, John Paul could just switch out to Incineroar and not take all that much damage. You know, get the Intimidate off on both these Pokemon, and then use his own Rayquaza to pick off the Rayquaza on Wolf's side. So Wolf's kind of like just that close. He can taste some knockouts here, but probably worth playing a little more conservatively. Unless you think John Paul's going to call that, maybe just try to get that Z move off for free, steal a knockout here. Be exciting to see what players do, especially, you know, Game 3, they felt each other out some. We'll see who's ahead on the mind games.
Well, John Paul is going to have to make the first move here with the swap out. Incineroar coming in to get that Intimidate off will help a lot with those damage dealers that are on Wolf's side of the board. But we have yet to see what attacks, if any, are actually going to come out. First, it's just going to be a switch out on Wolf's side to protect the Rayquaza. Incineroar now coming in to do the exact same thing, Intimidate.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised if we see Incineroar fall here. At least he'll get another Intimidate off. If not, get a nice fake out next turn. But, you know, the Incineroar getting weakened before was kind of the trade that Wolf paid for the board position he had. But getting this Tapu Koko in for free could be a big deal.
Yeah, it depends on what John Paul decided to target here. If, yeah, Rayquaza is going to go for some type of offensive move, at least going to Omega Evolve this turn, going to get itself a little bit more protection, but it is still intimidated from Wolf's Incineroar switching in.
Yeah, I kind of like this spot. We see the Dragon Ascent coming down. I assume this will be knocking out the Incineroar, but that's going to be a lot of reduced stats on this Rayquaza, and Tapu Koko got in the field without having to worry about taking any damage.
Incineroar could have gotten blown over with the wind, though, at that point. Had very little in the health pool. So Wolf now doesn't have the same Intimidate pressure, but John Paul does. So wonder if that's going to play a little bit of an effect as we move into the later parts of this game.
I think that's going to have to be the way that John Paul wins. I mean, the big advantage he has now is he has both Incineroar and Tapu Koko left, where Wolf only has one, so he can slide his Pokemon in and out of battle a lot easier. Unfortunately, Rayquaza is one of those Pokemon that are kind of going to need to slide out now. It's been intimidated, its defensive stats have been dropped. There are two Pokemon on Wolf's side of the field now that are threatening a lot of damage the other direction. He's kind of got to find a way to reset this, try to get his Rayquaza back in again. You know, he can't afford to lose that Pokemon right now. Also worth keeping in mind, he can't really afford to lose the Tapu Koko either. There's still that threat of Celesteela getting trapped with Rayquaza at the end of the game, which is definitely a win for Wolf.
Well, Wolf is actually going to protect the Rayquaza yet again, and Celesteela is going to come into that slot. Again, a passive turn here, protecting the Tapu Koko. Incineroar will fake out into that protect, but where is Rayquaza's Dragon Ascent going?
It hit the Celesteela, but does it matter?
I don't know if this is going to do too much here. Not terribly much, but again, got to chip away a little bit. Those leftovers have been continuously helping Celesteela to recover some of that HP every turn.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Life Orb is causing Rayquaza to lose some HP each time it attacks. Both sides kind of wind up taking pretty similar amounts of damage from really both of Rayquaza's last two attacks. I mean, certainly, you'd prefer to get that damage for John Paul, but at this point, it really doesn't want to be hit by a Dazzling Gleam. So this time, for sure, it will probably either have to switch out or use a Protect or something, and that's an opportunity for Wolf to start making some plays. If I'm Wolf, I'm probably trying to fish for a knockout on the opposing Tapu Koko at some point. I think that's the key to finishing this game off.
Another switch in on Wolf's side here, and John Paul going to protect the Rayquaza, knowing that it did just take some of that damage from that Life Orb the turn before, and we're getting ready for another Z move here, too.
I'll be curious to see what Wolf does. It seemed like clear enough that Rayquaza would probably protect, but after all those stat drops, even if he uses this into a protect, it's probably going to do a ridiculous amount of damage.
Yeah, absolutely. Twinkle Tackle's ready. I've seen a lot of Twinkle Tackle dances. This one might be one of the most important because it is going to find its way to that Rayquaza on John Paul's side, even with that protect. It is not going to get knocked out.
Still, though, through a protect, it darn near knocks it out. That's a lot of key damage. No amount of Intimidates, at least no reasonable amount of Intimidates, is going to be able to take that Rayquaza out of KO range from the extreme speed of Wolf's Rayquaza, and that's going to make the rest of this game a lot easier to play. The one positive for John Paul now, his Tapu Koko no longer has to be wary of Wolf's Tapu Koko hitting with the Z move, but you know, pretty much any move is going to knock out Tapu Koko with how little health it has left. John Paul, his health bars have really been whittling down. You're just a couple hundred HP now, separating him from being eliminated from the North America International Championships.
It's coming down to the wire. These are some really important turns coming up from both of these players. Can they protect their damage dealers? And can they also be able to take out the others?
And John Paul's played an incredible tournament so far. That 12-2 record, the best remaining, but who knows? It could be Wolf that finally knocks him off here and moves on to the finals. It's so close now.
So close. Both of John Paul's Pokemon are also within striking distance, too, of getting knocked out.
Yeah, where will the extreme speed go?
Yes, that's the big question. I mean, Incineroar is going to come into the Rayquaza spot just in case it needs to soak up some of that damage here. But not only that, the important part is that it can get that Intimidate off once again to try to mitigate some of this pressure. But Tapu Koko going to strike first here from Wolf's side into the Incineroar slot. But now it's time for John Paul to strike back.
Yeah, no extreme speed, so Tapu Koko able to get off this Z move before Rayquaza moves. Really going to need to knock it out here, or this could be trouble.
Gigavolt Havoc's going to do a lot if it does find its way into the Rayquaza slot. Oh, but it's the Tapu Koko that's going to be on the receiving end of that one.
Still nearly knocks it out.
Wow.
That's so much damage.
Hanging on by a thread, and now Rayquaza is free to do this Earth Power into the Incineroar, but that's also not going to knock it out.
And this time, the damage is enough to activate Incineroar's Berry. It's going to heal up, potentially be able to survive another attack, and Jean-Paul's getting closer. Perhaps he's edged his way back in this one. Still has to worry about extreme speed on Tapu Koko, but now that Incineroar's back in, Fake Out is an option, and that would be enough to knock out Wolf's Tapu Koko, so he's got to play a little carefully now, too.
That's a healthy kitty.
Yeah, that it is, and it's super dangerous now. Both these Pokemon can do a ton of damage to Celesteela, so any switch Wolf makes, if he's too haphazard about it, could really be punished. But now we do see that extreme speed.
Extreme speed will be enough to go into the Koko slot. It will get knocked out here, which means that there are no rotations available for John Paul. And now Incineroar taking all of this damage from the Dazzling Gleam. Flare Blitz, though, going to be able to fire back into the Rayquaza, but it just does chip here, not barely anything.
I mean, that Rayquaza just doesn't care about anything, and the knockout is so crucial for Wolf there. He's got to be feeling a lot better now. You know, the matchup on the field is relatively even, but you got to remember, Celesteela is still in the back here, and Incineroar's already consumed its berry. Simply attacking Celesteela with Flare Blitz may darn near knock Incineroar out now without Celesteela having to do anything. John Paul's going to have to navigate this really carefully to have enough health left to try to deal with that Celesteela. Just excellent play by Wolf. He saved the right Pokemon for his last, and as long as he doesn't trade very bizarrely here, we could be seeing Wolf move on.
I'm getting really excited. I'm actually on the edge of my seat to see what's going to happen in this next turn, because this really could decide everything at the moment. Extreme speed, though, going to hit first into John Paul's Rayquaza, so that damage is now off the table. And now the Thunderbolt is going to connect with Incineroar too, and that's going to knock it out.
The health bar goes down, and Wolfe Glick will be moving on to the International Championship Finals.
What a way to end this match here between Wolf and John Paul. Really came down to the wire there. John Paul made some excellent moves, excellent reads, but in the end, it was Wolf that's going to be able to move on.
It was such a close set the whole way through there. Both players could easily have won any of the games. There were points where it seemed like they were too far behind, and they kind of clawed their way back in that one. Really well-played defensive set. Both sides kind of showing off the power of the Pokemon that can slide in and out of battle so easily. Tapu Koko and Incineroar there. But Wolf able to come out just a little bit ahead. A really excellent match by two players. Excited to see how Wolf will do tomorrow, and I'm excited to see how both of these players will do at the World Championships.
Oh my goodness. I mean, what a better way to kind of finish out the top cut for today. I can't be more excited about the fact that we had several Game 3 matches on stream, and they all came down to the last final seconds.
Yeah, it just seemed like, all these matches were so close, or even, some of the players who lost the quarterfinals could probably easily have won this tournament if things had just gone a little bit differently. And it just shows you how small the margin for error was. Wolf played perfectly in all of his matches so far today, able to move on to the